Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I wanted to make a follow-up video towards my blind pick, first pick top lane tier list, and go a bit more into just the generalistic game and how can some of these picks be just in general first picked and what champs are the best to first pick. So let's get into it. I wanted to kind of cover a list of champions, so I'm going to put them in, talk about where their strengths lie, talk about them just in general, and then go from there. So Azir is the first champ I want to talk about. Azir really valuable as a first pick option. He is a two-way flex. You can play him as a very you can play him in dive comps, you can play him in engage comps, you can play him in anti-dive as well really effectively. His turret, his soldiers, just his overall raw DPS output when you're in his range is really high, and it makes him really valuable in that front. You can run him as an engage, of course, with his ultimate being a really strong tool. His E putting him in like a good amount of range. So overall, just a really powerful kit. It's strong in the current meta. Can really work as a first pick option. Moving on, Cho'Gath. Cho'Gath is quite valuable as a three-way flex. You can play him ADC with a Senna. We did see for a brief period of time where Cho'Gath not even being paired with a Senna and really finding quite a lot of success. He works quite well as an AP champion, a tank champion. You can run him both mid and top. You are kind of committed towards he is very skill shot reliant, and that you're kind of relying on teammates and setup. But if you can land your skill shots, you've got good control, you have good engage with your Q, Rupture, you can run them down. Your E is a really powerful tool for slowing and just the raw DPS output of it. His W is a great anti-disengage tool, and just really powerful, quite strong in that regard. Next champion, Ezreal. This is less of the fact that he can be flexed in two lanes. He is mostly just going to be played as an ADC. I'm not a huge fan of AP Ezreal. I think it's a very predictable play style, and it's just not as valuable. Doesn't do as much damage unless you're like really far accelerated into the game, and AD is really where a lot of the value lies in this champion. ADC Ezreal, quite powerful in the fact that he's very safe, does a good amount of DPS output. The problem is when you're looking at other marksmen where they do a lot of continuous damage, Ezreal is a lot more skill shot reliant, and he can't really continuously burn down tanks. He has a really bad time getting through tanks, especially later on into the game if they have a high amount of health. You can do things like balk Ezreal, but even then it kind of stunts you and you don't really want to be going down that path. So where he does have weaknesses as a first pick, he's very powerful in the fact that he's safe and just has a really good DPS output. Don't pair him with a Yuumi, pair him with something either aggressive. You can obviously do it with something like a Karma, like a lane neutralizer support. Something like a Jarno as well can work in that regard. And overall, just has a lot of power through that. Galio is like a two-way flex pick, has power in his just amount of immobilization he has, does a lot of damage. If you're going like the Night Harvester build, you can obviously opt into a more tanky version of Galio. I'd say he really falls short into a lot of AD champs, and in the current meta he doesn't perform particularly well, has a lot of weaknesses. So as much as he can function as a first pick, I wouldn't pick him as one of them. Gangplank, quite strong in the fact that he's great terrain control. His battles are really powerful in that regard, but you have to be really proficient at playing the champion. He can be flexed in two lanes. Problem with picking him early on, he does fall weakness to a lot of top laners, and you can kind of play that mid as well, so also wouldn't recommend the Gangplank. Garen actually is a three-way flex pick. You can play him mid, top, and jungle. Mid, Garen kind of slept on, really powerful to a lot of the AD champions there. Jungle Garen, not a bad clear. Does kind of fall short in his ability to gank and doesn't scale as hard as a lot of champions of the jungle. So kind of, it's more of a get him out of that lane place. If you just have two really weak, bad lanes for Garen, you can put him jungle. Top, if you're blinding Garen and you're only putting him top, then there are lots of things which can beat him. Things like Camille, obviously really good into the Garen. So overall, that has value in the three-way flex pick. Really powerful into a lot of champions, but can fall short into a decent amount as well. Gragas was one of the premier first pick champions. Unfortunately, he's now been nerfed. His passive took a 4-second hit. Still can work in 4 different roles. Quite powerful in that regard. Still definitely out there as one of the best for a first pick champion, but definitely seeing a decreasing amount of play. Yeah, really good as a support in some things like Rao, good as a mid laner, as just a high AAP threat. You can of course go more tanky as well, but mostly going to play AP when you're playing mid and jungle. Things like the Night Harvester work quite well. Top, you can opt into more tanky builds. I've seen things like the Sunfires, the Grasp, Jack-Show. I wouldn't recommend going Jack-Show though. Ice1 is probably his best tank mythic. Jack-Show just isn't something he can utilize particularly well. K'Sante, gonna get adjusted probably in 13.14, but on this patch 13.13 still works as a 2-way flex pick. You do have to be incredibly proficient of a champion though. If you're not great at playing K'Sante, just avoid him. He does work in both top and mid though, and has a lot of power in his CC, his tankiness, his damage. All that just really good. Does have a decent amount of losing matchups, but it mainly comes from the hard matchups get easier when you're more proficient of a champion by a decent margin. Kai'Sa works as a 2-way flex pick, can go AP, can go AD, has options there. Kind of, as a short range marksman, does fall short to a couple of bot laners, but has power in the fact that she's a 2-way flex pick. We have to see where she lands after like the static and the just the static changes. But I imagine we'll still see AP Kai'Sa mid, because things like Nashor's, Luden's, Ginsu's all still work quite well on her. Just loses a bit of the wave clear, loses a bit of the damage on the static proc as well. Jax works as a 3-way flex pick. You can put him mid, but most top laners can just go mid. They can function into a lot of the mid lane pool because they have traits which just enable them against things like Yasuo and just popular mid laners. He can obviously also go jungle. We have seen some competitive Jax jungle recently. It hasn't looked great. His clear is pretty slow, but he still does work there, and will keep up with most meta junglers. He is, of course, one of the best top laners in the game at the moment, so you're definitely going to want to look to put him top. He doesn't have a huge amount of answers. Things like the Gragas can like neutralize him. He does have a lot of neutralizers, but not a huge amount of losing matchups, so a lot of power in the pick there. Jace has seen a decline in popularity in pro play, which is kind of weird because this champ is still really strong. He is a great mid laner, great top laner, one of the more powerful AD top laners in the game at the moment. Definitely when we're like not seeing a huge amount of Aatrox, Camille, a lot of these champions just don't really seem to exist in pro play at the moment. So Jace has a lot of power there, and being a double flex pick, meta doesn't really suit him a huge amount, even though he can opt into things like Phase Rush to kind of just get through laning phase against a lot of these champions. But overall, still a lot of power in the champion there. Ivern did get nerfed this patch, definitely seeing a decreasing win rate in both top and mid, but still quite powerful in the jungle. You do have to play a lot around Daisy. Daisy is really where a lot of your power comes from, being able to enable her with on-hit, PTA, Virali, Lichbane, Nashor, stuff like this, makes Ivern really powerful. You can, of course, still go more supportive, and he does have power there. Heimerdinger. Powerful 3-way flex pick. You can play him both top, mid, and support. Top Heimerdinger, really oppressive. Same with mid Heimerdinger. But if you fall behind, it can really hurt because you really want to be quite heavily oppressing your opponent by getting your turrets down, hitting them with your stun grenade, hitting them with just skill shots in general. Things like Scorch and Arcane Comet just really amp up the ability to just poke out your laner. Still has weak matchups, but definitely really oppressive. And if people don't know how to play against Heimerdinger, because they haven't seen it a lot of the time, has a lot of potency in that. Ornn, quite powerful as a 2-way flex pick. You're not really going to see Ornn jungle. He just doesn't clear very quickly at all anymore. Has power in the fact that he doesn't have a huge amount of losing matchups, or like a lot of the matchups he can kind of go even. Things like Fiora and Gwen, still horrid for him. You do have to be really careful of these champions. They can just mow you down. Things like Darius and Olaf, you have to run Phase Rush if they're like decent of a champion. And then, yeah, into like ranged matchups, you can run things like the Arcane Comet, Phase Rush, inspiration tree, so things like Glacial or what's the other one? Spellbook. They all work quite well. Nautilus, really powerful at the moment as a pro pick. Has a lot of value in the fact he can be put mid and support. Has seen jungle play as well. Yeah, also seeing a declining of mid play, especially after the Abyssal changes, but still quite powerful there. You just have to know how to play around it quite well. Really good engaged champion, has really powerful tools for setup as well. Overall, just a lot of value in the champion. Good, strong tank, does a lot of damage. Just has to be kind of careful with sort of the mid lane matchups if you are putting him mid, and does get outclassed by a lot of junglers if you are putting him jungle. Many want to keep him support, but still quite powerful there. Poppy, really powerful at the moment as well. One of the most powerful champs in the game. Definitely really powerful as a top laner. Can work really well as a support into some of the supports champions in the pool at the moment. Works as a jungler, even though it did get nerfed fairly recently, and we have seen mid Poppy back in the past. Things like Chovy, of course, having played mid Poppy, don't really see that much anymore, but still works as an option as a flex pick. Karma, I'm not a fan of Karma. I haven't been a fan of Karma for a while. I think this champ doesn't do a huge, well, does a decent amount of damage early on, but it doesn't translate into a lot later. And then with the nerfs towards her shielding, like a group shielding, I think she really lost a lot of power through that. And overall, still a huge amount of fan of the champion anymore. I think she really feels weak to like hard engage, doesn't really find the angles to get big W heals off anymore. Her E shielding, of course, being less than it used to be, and her Q harass just not being that powerful later on into the game unless you really opt into it. Things like Night Harvester, Dark Harvest, I believe. You can run Arcane Comet, First Strike. There's options there to like really amp up your Q damage, but you really lose a lot of your supportive power. It's why I think the Night Harvester like CDR build might be her best option at the moment. So you really can translate you can get a lot more damage done later on and really spam out a lot of these spells. You can really hard chunk people with this kind of playstyle. But overall, it still has value top and mid, just not as much as she used to. None of the tank items really truly synergize with her. Iceborne, I think, is her best option because Radiant just, with the nerfs to it, increasing the duration between procs, just quite hard, just hard Karma quite a large amount. Senna, really powerful as an enabler for a lot of different ADCs, has a lot of power in that space. Things like Seraphine, Cho'Gath, Karthus, I mean, there's a ton of them. Senna just really powerful at enabling them. Seraphine, of course, really strong pairing, can go mid, support AD. I wouldn't recommend putting her support. She has quite a lot of power in AD and mid, especially as like a Liandry's user. She does have strong build options there, as like a hybrid damage util option, because things like Rylai synergize really well on her. You can run things like the Archangel, Lucidity's of course being really powerful on this champion. You don't usually want to build her full AP because she doesn't have great AP ratios, and a lot of her damage, or a lot of her power really comes from her ability to spec into util on top of her kit, so definitely look at that. Set, really powerful as a freeway flex pick. You're not seeing him jungle anymore, you're gonna see him support as like this freeway. Support Set, really good at this, pulling people out of the fight, has good strong CC on the E, really good damage, or if he takes a lot of damage, then you can reflect it with the W, that does a lot. So you can put him mid as well as like sustain through a lot of the poke and can just win out some matchups. Top Set also works because you can put him into a lot of champs where he can just really dominate on those matchups. But yeah, if he gets counter pick top lane, then you do kind of want to look towards shifting him elsewhere on the map. Sejuani, 4-way flex pick. Not really seeing any Sejuani support these days. But you can run her in 3 lanes. We have seen Caps play Sejuani mid, Sejuani jungle of course still being relatively good, and Sejuani top being more of this cheese option. She does a lot of damage, just a lot of power in that space, can win out against some really strong lane bullies, but things like Olaf will still run her over. Just powerful, but definitely not one of the best. but good in that space. Fairly easy to execute champion as well. Shen, kind of a two-way. You're not really going to see River Shen anymore. You're not really going to see mid Shen. But the mid Shen does work. Xpetu has played a lot of mid Shen, showed that it does have a lot of power. But yeah, support, mid, top. It's kind of where you're going to be playing him. Really good at neutralizing lane. Lots of his map presence gives him a lot of strong power. Tristana, also really powerful as a 2-3 wave flex pick. You can put her in the top lane, put her in the mid lane, put her in the bot lane. I think she lost a bit of power with the item changes fairly recently, but still does function as a top laner and a mid laner. Yeah, and a bot laner, but overall weaker with the items, but still really powerful at just being able to dish out a huge amount of damage, run Hail of Blades, lethal tempo, really good at sieging turrets, has a good safety net in the W, so overall just a lot of power there. Zac, 4-way flex pick. You can put him mid, top, jungle, support. He's really powerful in the fact that he is good at engaging, good at just keeping people off your ADC. His Q gives him a really powerful tool in that. His R also pushes people away, so that's also really valuable. E being a airborne as well, so just really powerful in that regard. His passive, really nice for just taking 1-for-1 trades, but then of course not dying in those trades because your passive enables you to take those. It's really powerful on Zac. Really strong as a tank, can go a spec into AP as well, so just a lot of power there. Swain is a 4-way flex pick. He can go everywhere but jungle. Top Swain and support Swain are probably his two weakest roles. ADC Swain has a huge amount of power in being enabled by his support. You do want to draft comps which can really enable Swain, and Swain does want to go against short range comps so he can continuously get use out of his ultimate and get a lot of sustain through people having to play relatively close to him. But if your team comp has a lot of setup, Swain is really valuable. Volibear is a 2-way flex pick. You're not really going to see him anywhere other than jungle and top. You can spec into AP. Things like the Cosmic Drive work quite nicely with champion. Is quite vulnerable to the fact that he has a very obvious playstyle on what he wants to do. He's very much just going to run at you and then dive onto your ADC or your main carry of your comp. He has powerful dives under turret. But overall, I'm not a huge fan of Volibear at the moment, so I wouldn't go down that route. Udyr, 2-way flex pick. You can play him both top and jungle. Really powerful as an engaged champion. You're not really going to see him as a disengage, but his ult does provide a level of that with the slow. Overall, just a huge amount of DPS on this champion for being relatively tanky. Things like Demonics, the Demonics for the more tanky R playstyle build, and then Triforce for the more Q heavy playstyle build. Both these do work. Udyr struggles with his later itemization. After his first couple of items, he struggles to really have a clear build, but things like Formel, Fon for your tanky Udyr build just doesn't have a strong mythic, and then Triforce kind of struggles later on, but you can go things like Sterix, and then some of the more other bruiser heavy items, things like Cleaver do also work. Moving on, Pantheon. Pantheon is a 3-way flex pick. Actually so strong, actually got buffed in the jungle and can function quite well there. Works top lane, works mid lane, works support. I'm not a huge fan of support Pantheon though. I think that is very much if you're playing a very kill heavy lane, but as a lot of these champions, you can kind of play around that quite comfortably. Jungle Pantheon, loads of global pressure with his ultimate, strong gank setup, just quite powerful there. Mid lane Pantheon, really powerful lane bully. You can run things like Mana Flow Scorch to really amp up that ability to just crush lane. If you're playing a more passive lane, you can opt into things which are more defensive. Things like Bone Plating, Unflinching, Overgrowth, Second Wind, all these options do work. You can run defensive boots, however, I would recommend just going Eclipse or Duskblade into, you can also run Youmuu's into Lucidities. That works in both top and mid. For top, you can also go more bruisery, things like Cleaver, Shojin to a degree, but you then tend to go Shojin on Assassin Pantheon anyway. Builds a huge amount of AD, so has a lot of value there. Sion actually works as a 4-way flex pick because you can play. I mean, it works as a 5-way flex pick, but you're not going to see Sion support, so it's really just a 4-way flex pick. We've seen Canyon play Sion jungle. It has a good clear speed. Sion mid works as a neutralizer. Sion top also does work as a neutralizer, but you can win some lanes. Senna Sion also works as a bot lane combo. Just only really pick it with Senna. Twitch. Quite powerful as a three-way flex pick. You're not going to see Twitch jungle anymore. Twitch jungle just doesn't clear very well and is very cheesy. But Twitch mid, powerful, wave clear, does a huge amount of damage. If you want to learn how to play Twitch mid, just watch Russell IRL. He plays it a decent amount. Twitch AD, really powerful in the amount of damage he does. Has some really strong AD builds with a bit of hybrid in there. Things like Ginsu's, Bork, quite powerful in that regard. Of course, you can also go with like Runins, and then support Twitch, still the AP, very gold hungry support champion, works quite well there. W also provides insane zone control. Taliyah, quite powerful as a jungle mid and used to be a support pick. I don't think you can pick her so much as a support anymore, but still has a decent jungle clear if you're kiting out the camps correctly. Works quite well as a mid laner, has decent wave shove. You just have to be able to last it well on this champion. Not an insane amount of damage unless you're really far ahead on Taliyah, but quite good zone control. Quite good as a like anti-dash, anti-mobility champion where you're really looking to control the pace of the game. If you pair her alongside things like Kiana, Gangplank, which can really amp up the ability to train control with each other, quite powerful in that space as well. Mordekaiser. Mord is a 3-way flex pick. Quite vulnerable in like he's very obvious telegraphed in what he wants to do. Things like QSS and a lot of champions do counter him, but as he can be played in 3 different roles, you can of course flex him depending on matchup. It can really easily isolate 1v1 and 1v1 junglers, can hold out in the mid lane and can just win out in a lot of matchups in the top lane as well. Ziggs is quite powerful in the fact that he's very safe, can be a 2-role flex. Just does a huge amount of AP damage. If you're looking to open up your draft with an AP champion, Ziggs is a good option for that. Rumble is a 4-way flex pick. Still not, you're not going to see a huge amount of Rumble support. It's very niche, and you're only really picking this if like a Pantheon, you're just playing really aggressively and really using your early game damage to bully out other support champions and kind of abuse it through that. But mid, jungle, top, he does work in all 3 of these roles. Does a decent amount of just does a huge amount of early game damage. Can really bully out a lot of champions, but does fall off later on into the game. His ult is his only real redeeming factor past his E later on. His Q just doesn't do a large amount of damage, unless you're like turbo far ahead, but you're not really going to see, depending on where you're playing, in lower elo, then yeah, you can get those advantages, so he can still be really powerful, but in mid, high, and like competitive, sometimes you can struggle to get these levels of advantages, and he can fall off later on into the game. Singed is a 2-way flex pick. I'm not going to lean into the idea of Singed support or jungle. Singed support is very much a Lehends pick. I'm not a huge fan of it. I think it has very vulnerable aspects towards it, but Singed mid, Singed top, really powerful. Really looking to get a lot of farm, get your items online. Things like Radiant, Roa, Jackdaw workers as mythics. You're gonna of course go things like the Demonics and Rhyolite early on. He synergizes really well with these options. There are other things you can build, things like the Abyssal also do work quite nicely on Singed. Zilean is a 3-way flex pick. You can play him top, mid, support. Zilean, top is more of just a being able to pick up a wave and just kind of farm up. He's really powerful as an enabler later on into the game. If you're just looking to like neutralize top lane, Zilean can work in that regard. Zilean mid, you can also do similar things to Zilean mid, but you can get a kill pressure on a couple of laners, and then Zilean support, looking to really just enable your ADC, get levels going, use your ultimate really powerfully. I mean, yeah, Zilean with the mid jungle pairing is quite powerful in that space as well. Karthus is really powerful as a 5-way flex pick. but top and support's kind of niche. You can play support if you value him for his W. And he does do a decent amount of early game damage. You can, of course, play him ADC. He's really powerful in ADC. Has some really strong pairings. Things like the Senna, the Leona, both work really well with him. There are a decent amount of other options there, though. Just does a huge amount of AP damage. And if you're really looking for an AP fill-in slot, then yeah, Karthus works there. Karthus mid. Veigar V2 is your best person to watch for this. Quite a powerful champion. Does a huge amount of damage. Can 1v1 most mid laners, and then Karthus top, if you're just looking to farm up and be an ult bot, he can function in this lane. Jungle also just farming up, looking to be an ult bot, but yeah, both these can still contest with other champions, definitely. Sylas, you don't really want to open with him early because he's quite vulnerable to just a lot of weak ultimates, but you can flex him top, jungle, mid, and then support, depending on whether you're like against like Varus, Leona. We did see it in the past. I'm still not really sold on it, but it does work there. Sylas, jungle, quite popular still at the moment. Has been since the jungle item changes. Just very aggressive. You're building things like your Night Harvester, your Shadow Flame, and really looking to abuse those AP ratios and just one-shot people. Sylas top and mid, you do kind of want to spec into Lost Chapter and just be a bit more util heavy, but you're still really powerful, do a lot of damage, have a lot of sustain, so quite powerful in that space. Nasus, freeway flex pick, you're not really going to see him jungle. Nasus top, really powerful, can win into most champions at level 6 and 9 being your main power spikes. Nasus mid, gaining popularity, can just farm up and sustain through a lot of mid laners, and then Nasus support, you're really valuing him for your W. Into things like Kalista and Zeri, but I'm still not sold on it, but it does function there. Maokai is quite powerful as like a freeway flex pick. You can put him support, jungle, top. Top is kind of sleeper, really powerful as just a sustain through lane champion. You can go even, has some really cheap builds. Jungle, you can optimize into like an AP heavier build, things like the Demonics, the Liandry's, does a huge amount of damage, has really good setup, and his E provides really strong amounts of vision. Support, Maokai, really powerful engaged champion there, and you can really abuse things like your Even Shroud, your Radiant. You're mainly going to go Even Shroud and just set up for your ADC. But overall, just really strong freeway flex pick. Couple more. Neeko. Neeko's power really comes from the fact that she has a couple of, or she can go like on her or AP. On her is mainly what you're going to see in the top lane, but you can still go AP. Jungle Neeko still works quite well, does a decent amount of damage, has a good clear speed. Overall, just, yeah, decent there. And then mid lane Neeko, it's where mainly you're going to see her, had an insanely high win rate pre-patch. Got nerfed this patch, but still really strong. Only a bit of cooldown on the Q and a loss of damage on the W early on. So overall, still a really powerful champion. You can also slot her support if you're really valuing the E and her ability to kind of manipulate the state of the game. Her ult is also really powerful here. So overall, really powerful champion. Graves, freeway flex pick. You can put him top, mid, and jungle. Jungle does really good for like just contesting, does a huge amount of damage, really powerful itemization. You can go things like lethality, crit. Top lane you can go similar, but you're mainly going to itemize towards a more lifesteal heavy build. Mid lane you can go both similar to jungle. Overall, just good at lane neutralizing, and then can be really powerful in the jungle as a really high damage threat, especially if you're really proficient of the champion. Annie, two-way flex pick. You can play Annie top, but I wouldn't recommend it. But yeah, Annie support, Annie mid. Did get that this patch, but Tibbers still really powerful. The E shield also really strong in the fact that it can apply things like Liandry's and Rylai's to the opponent if they hit it. Overall, just really looking to play around your summon, but you yourself still do a lot of damage, so there is a lot of power there. And last but not least, Cassie. Cassie, really powerful as like a two-way flex pick. You can of course do some cheese things with like Twitch support on Cassie ADC, but Cassie mid, really strong at just chasing down a lot of mid laners and just beating out a lot of mid laners. Same with top, actually. It just wins out against a lot of top champions. There's really strong engage, there's really strong disengage. Just overall, this champion is kind of overloaded and and is just constantly holding a high win rate this season. Just really powerful. Yeah, just relatively safe at the same time. So yeah, those are kind of some of the champs I want to talk about as being like multi-flex options with certain play styles that you can kind of construct your draft around. But I'd like to know if you've got any ideas. What do you like opening draft with if you do things like this, and what kind of play styles do you guys enjoy playing around? So yeah, I'll see you next time. Goodbye.